That's right. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Good. Jim Coogan and Monroe Anderson have left the building. Jim Coogan and Monroe Anderson have left the building, but Kina Collins is here. She's running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District on the west side of the city of Chicago. Goes out into the suburbs as well, Oak Park, etc. It actually goes into Englewood.
Also in South Side?
Yeah, it's a long, windy, gerrymandered district. We'll talk all about that before we get to Kina. D, you got an update for me?
Oh, absolutely. Here, I got to weigh in here with the live stream chat room. They're going crazy here today. Let's see here. Just read some comments from people here. Earlier we mentioned that we did a poll from CNN saying that they think Donald Trump will win, 54%, right?
Yeah.
Left-wing Limbaugh weighed in. He said,
right.
I think Trump will win. The
Okay.
majority of Dem candidates don't believe in anything, so why would swing voters believe in them?
Wow. All right. Well, left-wing Limbaugh's feeling the Trumpster, huh?
And finally here, I think now one of the big things, listeners on our live stream chat, if you've yet to join it, you should, because it's fascinating. One thing that our live stream chat room loves to do is just mess with Ben Joravsky about how his love for Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi.
Okay, more Pelosi than Biden, but whatever.
So I think this is where they're going when Stephen asks this question. Ben, what is your definition of a corporate Democrat?
Wow, Stephen. A Democrat who looks out for the interest of corporations over working people. That's what my definition would be. That's me just thinking it through, Stephen. And we had one as our mayor for the last 8 years. And Hillary Clinton's campaign, unfortunately, sure looked like she was far more concerned with the interests of the well-to-do. And corporation also serves as sort of like a metaphor, in sort of a class struggle, if you will, for looking out for the interests of the well-to-do. So like when you think of taxation, you don't want to go too far in the direction of progressive taxes because you don't want to upset the well-to-do. You don't want to tax like Wall Street profits, et cetera. Right. So that to me is where we are. That's how I would define a corporate Democrat.
Okay. All right, buddy. Well, let's hold those feet to the fire because I'm pretty sure this is where Stephen was going with this question. Is Joe Biden a corporate Democrat?
Oh, yeah. Duh. Yeah.
His first fundraiser was with insurance companies.
Yeah, and so was Barack Obama. All right, let's be real, Democrats out there. So was Rahm Emanuel, so are some of the people that you've been electing time in, time again. So not my fault. Most cases, well, I did vote for Barack Obama.
It's so funny, Stephen.
Don't lie.
Stephen weighed in all caps here. He said he literally was Rahm's coworker in that administration. Ben, please.
Yes, he was. Rahm worked for Barack Obama, and it was that identification with Barack Obama that, in my humble opinion, convinced many Chicagoans to elect him, to vote for him in 2011. And then when Barack reminded us of that, Kina Collins, and you were living here in Chicago, many Chicago voters said, well, yeah, he was with Barack, and I'll give him one more chance. And he's wearing the sweater. And then guess what happened? The Laquan McDonald video pops out about 6 months later. Chicagoans are like, what did we do?
That's right.
So for all those downloaders out there, hey, join the Facebook, or not the Facebook, but the YouTube live stream, and send us a message. Be like Stephen. We do it 1 to 3 p.m. Tuesday through Friday, chicagoreader.com, chicago.suntimes.com/Joravsky. Check us out, won't you?
All right, very good. Thank you, T. All right, Kina Collins from the 7th Congressional District. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, very good. A little bit before we take an issue, I already said I'm going to ask you about impeachment and how much of an issue that is in the 7th Congressional District, how strongly you believe in it. If you win, you may, by then it would be a whole new Congress. But if this battle is still going on with Trump, you may have to vote on that. So before we get to that, a little bit about your background. Is your first run for office?
This is my first run for office. So I was born and raised on the west side of Chicago, still live in Austin, so deeply rooted in the 7th Congressional District. A lot of my background in organizing work started as gun violence prevention and criminal justice reform work, and has now elevated into healthcare advocacy. My day job is to work as the national organizers for Physicians for a National Health Program, which is essentially an organization that has a base of 20,000 doctors and medical students from across the country who are fighting to secure a single payer Medicare for all system. So for me, it's not just like a political policy talking point. I've been traveling the entire country from blood red Alabama Alabama and Louisiana and Texas, all the way to the Rust Belt in Pittsburgh or the ports of entry in San Diego, working with doctors and medical students to secure a single payer system, right? And it's the actual physicians who are advocating for this. Attended Von Steuben on the north side. We had a conversation about that. Went to school at Louisiana State University down in South Louisiana in Baton Rouge, and came back, started a community organization called Chicago Neighborhood Alliance, where we focused on the reduction of gun violence and particularly civic engagement. Did a ton of work around this last municipal election and helping some of the new city councilmen get elected. And I also co-authored House Bill 5544, the Illinois Council on Women and Girls Act. And it is essentially an advisory council to the governor and the state General Assembly to advise them on any policies that directly impact women and girls across the state. And it was actually signed under Bruce Rauner. It was an extremely progressive bill, talked about transgendered rights, talked about expanding reproductive health care and education, talked about pay wage equity and making sure that the council was racially proportionate to the state. And really, during that time, I traveled in 68 counties out of 102 in the state, talking to different community groups, trying to get their buy-in for the bill. And I was just like blown away at how we were all experiencing the same economic realities in these working class places. So after it got passed, I thought I could do this, right? And threw my hat in the ring for Illinois 7th.
All right, before we go into some of the things you raised here, I got to go back to something you said. You went to Von Steuben. I have to say this, folks. Okay, this is how old I am. This is how ancient I am. My oldest daughter went to high school with Kina Collins. Yeah. So, I'm now seeing kids that are my daughter's age running for Congress. Man, I'm like so old.
Who's getting older, us or you?
It's him. Yeah. Without a doubt. Always him.
Old man River over here. But so I remember these kids when they were in high school, and now they're grown up and professional and running for Congress, and good God. Anyway, all right, enough of that, me reminiscing about how old I am. All right, Kina Collins, single payer.
Yeah.
I say this all the time on the show. Dennis, that good-looking young man over there, who's the producer of the show, he firmly believes that the Democrats can beat Donald Trump if they, without any apologies, nominate a candidate who says, without, like I said, just no doubt, I am for single payer. I'm going to use all the power I have as president working with Congress to get a single payer. Dennis believes that this is a selling point that could enable Democrats to defeat Donald Trump. You say you've been all over the country.
That's right.
Alabama, you've been talking about this.
Yeah.
Do you agree with young Dennis over there?
Dennis is 100% spot on the money.
Oh, wow. It happens every now and again.
So here's the facts. Let's take our emotion out of it. It is fiscally responsible for us to be taking on the stance of a single payer system. And I'm not talking about Medicare for all or Medicare for America and all this other stuff that they're coming out with. This needs to be a national health insurance program that is streamlined. We are losing a ton of money through copays, through premiums, through overhead, through marketing, through insurance companies who are not using those dollars to basically keep us healthy. And they use a lot of the money to vet out sick people in our country and make more profit off of those who are healthier, right? That's why we see things, huge contentions with pre-existing conditions, for example. We need clean healthcare, and this clean healthcare bill in this country where it includes mental health and vision and dental and reproductive health and is culturally competent, right? It was the defining issue in 2018. Healthcare is a purple issue. It's not red, it's not blue, and it quintessentially strikes at the heart of what is going on, where this fight is not me and you, it's top and bottom. It's those who have and those who have not, right? And any American, whether it's a farmer, someone living in the Appalachians, someone down south, someone in the Rust Belt, someone here in Chicago, can understand that we all really are an illness away from bankruptcy. And that's just, it's not a political issue, it's a moral issue.
Do you think that the number of people who have private insurance and are happy with their private insurance will vote against a candidate who endorses single payer or Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, on the grounds that, well, I got mine, so why should I pay for them?
Well, what I would say is I would ask them how informed that are they with their insurance, because a lot of insurance companies don't even cover everything. So the reality is people are not in love with their health insurance. They like the coverage and the providers that they have. They like their doctors, their nurses, folks who they interact with. They don't care about the person working at Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield. And if they really knew the profit that's being made by these insurance companies and how many people are siped out, I think that this is something that is a uniting platform for a lot of Americans, and it's to your benefit, right? Because you should be fully covered, and a lot of folks who have insurance are not.
Now, I have had this conversation for so many years since Obamacare was passed. That was it was a crowning achievement of Barack Obama's first term. I don't think he got any Republican support for it. He used the majority that the Democrats had at the time to get it through. And my friends of the corporate Democratic persuasion were saying, Ben, you're being unrealistic to hold out for a single payer, for a government-sponsored plan, that we got to keep the insurance companies in it because you don't want them to be opposed to it and using their might to defeat it. This is good, pragmatic strategy. This is kind of like Rahm Emanuel type Democrats were telling me this.
Right.
Okay. Do you think, in retrospect, when you look back, Kina, that was a wise policy for Democrats to pursue, to pass a healthcare policy that has the insurance companies still embedded in it?
I just don't see the benefit. And my stance personally in this campaign, on the campaign trail, would be we need to take privatization out of things like our healthcare industry, our education system. I mean, they even have jails privatized, which is really weird, right? And so for me, I think that if they really looked at how their doctors in particular are spending 85% of their time filling out administrative work and paperwork and not dealing with your preventative care and the things that could keep you healthy, then they would see that it's not very smart to keep insurance companies in healthcare bills.
Yeah. Well, maybe that was the only thing that a Barack Obama get. I will be arguing this point forever with my friends of the Rahm Emanuel corporate Democratic persuasion, whether we could have gotten something a little more comprehensive back in 2010 or whenever it passed. All right. Now let's talk about you running for the 7th Congressional. That is a district that historically has been on the west side of Chicago. It's a little more spread out now. It goes in, as you said, in the south side areas, goes into the western suburbs. The incumbent is a longtime Democrat, a liberal Democrat, Danny Davis. Why should voters vote Danny Davis out of office?
Well, first off, I would say that this is a part of the democratic process, right? We've had someone in leadership who served in leadership for 22 years. And I think whenever we have a primary, constituents and voters in our district should have the opportunity to hear what are the priorities of our district and how are we going to get those things implemented and moved forward, right? So it's important for me to mount this challenge because I think that this is what voters deserve, and they deserve an option. They deserve to hear different ways to move our district forward. So, and
do you feel it's like a daunting task? I mean, the guy's been, I remember his first, that's how old I am. I remember his first aldermanic election, 1979. He's been around forever. He's a well-known name. What makes you confident that you can defeat him?
Well, I think that we have a groundswell right now, right? Folks are looking to be mobilized. They're looking to take an angle where we are implementing leadership that's interested in coalition building and movement building, right? We have a lot of pressing issues on the forefront, and we have to have a political reckoning with the Democratic Party on elevating new leadership, right? Or we get left behind in a lot of these conversations when we talk about healthcare, when we're talking about the reduction of gun violence, and we see high schoolers essentially who can't even vote, who are pushing the envelope and saying we need universal background checks, and people are slow walking in Congress, it's time that we have a serious conversation about who are we going to get to move these things forward, particularly around environmental justice, right? There's a timeline on that. That's not something that we can just wait on. And so for me, we have to, like I said, engage in that coalition and movement building. And I think that we saw a lot of that in the midterms and here in the municipal elections in the city of Chicago.
Now, generally, when I think about the congressional races from 2018 that you just alluded to, the candidates that got the Democrats most excited, it seemed like, were people like Lauren Underwood or Sean Casten, who were running in again in areas represented by Republicans. So the notion was that you could drive out a Trump supporter and put a Democrat in that person's place. So it was advancing progressive policies this way. In your case, you're running against a Democrat who'll probably vote the same way you would vote on most issues. So what is the advantage to Democrats to getting somebody younger and newer in office, in your humble opinion? What is the advantage for Democratic voters to have someone like you in the office?
So I think it's also approach to a lot of the legislation that'll be brought forth, right? So one of the most defining things, I think, for me as a candidate against the incumbent who's had a long and distinguished career, is that I'm not going to take corporate PAC money. I'm not going to take fossil fuel money and money from pharmaceutical companies or private insurance companies, because I'm in this work, right? Organizing around the country, hearing the stories of everyday Americans, and seeing that reality lived out in places like Austin, where I live in the district, which is extremely a working class community, right? So that in itself, voting and approaching the legislation on how to implement it, I think is a huge difference. I think you mobilize differently when you don't have the interests of corporate PACs or corporate lobbyists, right? And it allows you to put working class families first, right? Because if they're the ones who you are responsible to or being held accountable to, then you won't just vote the right way. You're going to do the right thing, right? Because that's who's with you. And so for me, I've just seen across the Democratic Party how we have allowed special interest groups, lobbyists, like I told you, the crust of a lot of my organizing work was in gun violence prevention. The NRA has bought and paid for our Congress, a ton of people, and our Congress and congressional leaders. And for me, that's just not something that I'll be doing.
All right. That is Kina Collins. She's running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District, the incumbent Danny K. Davis. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask her the impeachment question. We'll be right back after this.
Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan. All right, everybody. After 5 years in Andersonville, Murray and White, a.k.a. Ben's favorite place to shop, has made the difficult decision to close their doors. But everything in the store is now on sale. Notable sale items like Voluspa and Nest fragrances brand candles are 20% off. Maybe. I say maybe because, boy, our host, Ben Joravsky, loves him some candles. All the peppermint candles are gone. I know that much. That's his favorite candle.
No. I've decided it's the cannabis-smelling ones.
Oh, cannabis-smelling candles. I think people light candles to get rid of the smell of cannabis.
Oh, is that
whatever,
right?
Whatever. That's
cool. Who knew?
Cannabis candles.
I just wanted to say cannabis because that's the correct word these days.
Yeah, you better start using that word.
Cannabis.
He loves cannabis candles, guys, apparently. I didn't know they made those. Whoa.
Yeah,
so
cannabis
notable
candles.
sale items like Voluspa and Nest fragrances brand candles are 20% off. The peppermint and the cannabis candles are gone, but these lines can rarely be found on sale. So while 20% isn't the largest discount, lovers of of both these popular candle lines like Ben have been buying them up. All rugs are 30% off in store and new orders through June 1st. All floor sample furniture is 30 to 50% off. Antique furniture pieces 40 to 50% off. Pillows 40% off. People, you get the point. Go to Murray and White now before the doors close for good. After 5 years in Andersonville, Murray and White have made the difficult decision to close their doors, but right now everything's on sale. Maybe not those candles, because Ben Joravsky probably bought all of them. But head to Murray and White now to save yourself some money. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, pass me the cannabis candle. Okay. Thank you. And take us home.
I knew you'd love that cannabis candle. Yes, indeed. Kina Collins running for 7th Congressional District, candidate for Congress in the 7th Congressional District. Not only is she a candidate for Congress, not only is she an advocate for single payer, not only is she standing up in the fight for sensible gun legislation, she plays one heck of a piano, huh, D? Yeah, that girl can play the piano.
All of our guests are so good at piano.
Isn't that amazing how that works?
It's crazy.
She learned that at Von Steuben, all right? The music class of Von Steuben.
That's right.
Some teacher taught her how to do that. All right, D, you got an update for me?
Heard a lot of good things about that Von Steuben, I tell you what. Maybe it's just because I hang out with Ben Joravsky all the time. But, okay, we have two updates.
Panthers.
Go Panthers. There you go. Okay, we have two updates here. Number one, former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel.
Take a chill pill, man.
Okay,
yeah, that guy.
What is he up to now?
Ben, you're going to get a kick out of this.
I bet I will.
All right, former Chicago mayor and longtime Democratic operative, corporate Democratic operative, am I right? Rahm Emanuel will join Boutique Investment Bank Centerview Partners, LLC, bringing a Rolodex built over a 30-year political career. It says here that he's going to Wall Street. Mr. Emanuel, who left the office last month, will open a Chicago office for Centerview and advise clients on merger deals and other matters, he said in a joint interview today with Centerview co-founders Blair Efron and Robert Pruzan, two people who will never be on this program. They sound really rich. But, yeah, Mayor Rahm going to Wall Street.
I think Stephen, one of our listeners, weighed in. What's a corporate Democrat?
Yeah.
Stephen, that pretty much sums it all up right there. By the way, I knew it was just a matter of time before Rahm cut that deal.
Man.
And, he ruled as though he was already looking out for the interests of his hedge fund friends, his investor. Wow. Kina Collins, that is something else. I didn't think he was going to go work like in a domestic violence shelter or going to, work for advocating for sensible gun control or for single payer.
I mean, after your administration has been complicit in a cover-up of the murder of a child, I don't think you do those things either.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not. I went to the screening last night for 16 Shots.
Oh, yeah.
That 3 years ago, running for Congress was not in the plan. Right? I was on the front lines with William Calloway and Camila Williams and a lot of the youth activists, and people thought we were crazy for participating in those protests. But the documentary, and I hope everybody watches it when it comes out, it really shows how we basically cratered the entire existence of what the Chicago machine really is. Mm-hmm. And it was, pretty much taken down by a bunch of 17 to 24-year-olds who just had enough.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised with Rahm.
Yeah, 16 Shots. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I heard it's coming out. It's supposed to be good. D, you got another update?
From the former mayor to the current, Mayor Lori Lightfoot today added another round. Well, this, by the way, comes from the one and only Fran, the Woe Man Spielman in the Chicago Sun-Times. Okay. Mayor Lightfoot today added another round to the seemingly endless parade of ethics reforms tailor-made to change the culture of City Hall corruption laid bare by the racketeering indictment against Alderman Ed Burke. That's a good writing, Fran. You're not playing around. Lightfoot's plan includes allowing the city inspector general to audit city council committees, banning some, but not all, outside employment for aldermen, and higher fines for ethics violations. She went on to say that this is because of Ed Burke. Here's the quote from Lightfoot. There's no mistake that this is designed to address the problem of Ed Burke trying to monetize his position as an alderman and as a chairman.
Yeah, I would take the word trying out of that sentence. He did monetize his position as chairman of the finance committee, as the alderman of the 14th Ward, by having a property tax business. And I don't know what the constitutionality is of banning aldermen from outside employment in terms of saying, like, you cannot have a property tax business. I certainly see the merit in banning such an operation. I've had this conversation with property tax lawyers who are also politicians for a long time. There's a definite conflict of interest, in my humble opinion, when the chief financial, overseer in the city council of all contracts, of all TIF deals, is also a property tax attorney and is able to shake down business from people who got their hand out looking for, a TIF money for their developments that they probably don't even need. So yeah, it's a long time coming. I welcome it. And to the point that Kina was making, I think they're tied together. I think that the eruption of protests that took place it started around November, around Thanksgiving of 2015, when the Laquan McDonald video was first released, right. In one way or other sort of led to just the general dissatisfaction with the way things are done in the city of Chicago. And then, of course, ultimately worked to Lori Lightfoot's benefit, even though, ironically, many of the activists who are at the forefront of the movement against the policies of Rahm in relation to Laquan McDonald did not support Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, we remember her from the police board meeting and hearings. At this point, it's just accountability, right? She is in that position now. So it is up to us as the collective, as the greater community of Chicago, to hold her accountable. And you can say the right things, but we have to see the action behind it. Yep.
You're not afraid of saying that, even though she's now the most powerful person in the city of Chicago?
I mean, I think that saying that holding someone accountable is not just only an act of resistance, it's an act of love. That's how you say I love my community, is when I'm going to hold elected officials and those who have power accountable, right? And that's not a slight to her. That should be for everybody, right? Like anybody who's an elected official. And so I think that when you know better, you do better. And as a community, as activists, as organizers, we know better, right? When we were doing the protest 3 years ago, and even further, because there were activists who had started with Rekia Boyd, right? We had no clue. We just knew that it was wrong, right? This is wrong. And we did it peacefully. And I don't know if a lot of people paid attention to other direct actions that were happening around the country, but we exercised our constitutional right to an economic boycott. And it worked, right? And then we built on that, and we kept building. And also got other people elected into city council now, right? And so I would hope that, her administration and, her would take that as a challenge, to do what hasn't been done in Chicago in a really long time, and that's to do good and seek justice.
All right, now let me ask you the impeachment question. You were sitting here listening to Jim Coogan and Monroe Anderson talk about the pending showdown between Democrats in Congress and Donald Trump. Or the Democrats, you would be, if you were victorious, one of those Democrats in Congress are demanding that Donald Trump turn over evidence, have some of his former aides testify, Hope Hicks, etc., before Congress, congressional committee. The Trump White House is so far resisting. It could come down to a judicial order, whether he will actually order his aides to turn over evidence. This is where we're heading. Kina, do you support right now an impeachment process, a procedure to have an impeachment vote and essentially put the president on trial?
Absolutely. Absolutely. His administration has had a complete lack of regard for the Constitution, for the checks and balances in the Constitution. He has implemented unconstitutional executive orders like the Muslim ban, supporting things like these abortion bans that are happening across the states, which we know is unconstitutional because of Roe v. Wade. We have seen a full-on attack. This is someone who has called neo-Nazis, who marched through the streets of Charlottesville and said, Jews will not replace us, very fine people, and murdered somebody. There's a plethora of things, right? And all personal feelings to the side, let's just talk about the nitty gritty. The investigation or the report that was released has not only been compromised by the current U.S. Attorney General, but we know that there has been insinuation that, yeah, there are charges in that filing and in that report. that warrants investigation, articles of impeachment, and a trial that needs to take place. My frustration comes when we have leadership in the Democratic Party, right? Because we know where the GOP stands on this. When we have representation in the Democratic Party that are using excuses like the polling doesn't show that Americans want the president impeached. Number one, we know that polls change. The natures of polls change. And as a matter of fact, if we go back to Richard Nixon, when they were beginning the impeachment process for him, he had a 65% approval rating in the country, and only 19% of the country wanted impeachment charges on him. By the end of the trial, the numbers had flipped, and he had a 25% approval rating, and over 57% of Americans agreed that he needed to be impeached.
So what's your sense of what the attitude is in the 7th Congressional? Do you think people are paying attention? Do you think people care about this issue? Do you think they would support an impeachment? How important of an issue do you think this is in the 7th Congressional District? So
our district is a true blue district. We are a D plus 38. We're extremely progressive. So we know just, off those basic
D
facts.
plus 38 means that the Democrat gets 38% points. Well,
meaning
that's
that
a Democratic district.
We're the bluest in Illinois, in all of Illinois. We are, I think, number 4 in the country.
Wow, you bluer than the 1st?
Yeah, we're bluer than the 1st district.
Wow.
We're bluer than the 1st.
You can't be bluer than this room. This is the bluest room. Anybody in this room ever voted Republican?
But, even with that, every blue won't do, Ben, because look at what's happening. This is about the morality of our country. Like, forget if you think the polling says what's right and what's wrong. He has exhibited egregious behaviors and attacks, not only against our congressional leaders, but he has aligned himself with folks who are enemies to the United States of America and alienated our allies. So this is a fiscal issue. This is a social issue. It's a political issue, and it needs to be a moral issue.
All right. I think there's no denying that if Kina Collins was in Washington right now, vote for impeachment. All right.
I'd have the banner.
The vote for impeachment. One more time, thank you very much, Kina, for coming in. I appreciate it. And Kina, once again, is running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District. We had Anthony Clark on yesterday. Danny K. Davis, we're going to reach out to him as well. I think it's really important that a district that is as blue as the one that Kina is running in, as she just stated, really have the most progressive candidates in the world, because you're not going to get punished for taking progressive views or liberal views, whatever you call them, in the 7th. Maybe Lauren Underwood could say, well, I got to, walk a fine line because I'm in a purple district. But whoever is the congressperson or congresswoman, congressman from the 7th has no excuse. So, Kina Collins, thank you very much for stopping in. Also want to thank the great Jim Coogan and Monroe Anderson. That was a blast talking to them about Trump. And Leah did a great job, as she does every day with her interviews. She's fantastic.